Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Founders Craft Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gonzalez, and today I'm joined with my good friend, Paul Leone, the president and CEO of the Breakers Palm Beach. Today we're going to talk a little bit about his journey coming to the Breakers, and then what led to the transformation of the culture to what is now a template for many organizations around the world. We're going to dive into some deep questions around culture, open door policy, innovation, how to scale, how to hire, and some of the things that led to the success of what the Breakers is experiencing today. Let's jump into the conversation. Now, when you think of the landscape, 1985, was it, that you joined the Breakers, Palm Beach at the time, what was the competitive landscape like? I mean, in terms of setting the bar for hospitality, looking at how well you're doing in comparison to the others, what was that like?
You know, there was a real sea change underway at that time in terms of the competitive landscape. And this was a really valuable lesson for our organization, for me, and I think others to learn from. And that is to never rest on your laurels. So, you know, the Breakers had enjoyed, throughout its history, very little competition. There weren't that many of these extraordinary physical plants and beautiful locations at the luxury level. And I think, maybe they got a little complacent, and on the scene comes the Four Seasons organization, Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, and Ritz-Carlton. And they, as I look back on it now, there's no doubt in my mind they not only thought there was there would be tremendous demand for new luxury hotels, but I think they were taking straight aim at these legacy properties.
Got it. Yeah.
And saying, they're falling behind, they're physically falling behind, and in other ways. And to my earlier point, I think, they were going to bring not only a better physical product, but a better sort of mousetrap, a better model, culture, service, financial administration, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was a really tough time for the Breakers and resorts like us in the mid 80s.
Yeah. And so thinking about the founding of the Breakers, now I understand, was it Henry Flagler that declared that the Breakers was going to be the best luxury hotel in the world, or was it in the country, or what was his vision like? And
yeah, as we sit here having this conversation, I look over my shoulder out at the ocean. And the way the history tells the story is back in the late 1800s, Henry Flagler, he was one of the most successful business people in the world at the time, and retired in his retirement years, but too much energy and vision to sit around. And he decides to start developing the east coast of the state of Florida through his development of the railroad. And with every sort of railroad development came the acquisition of real estate. And so time he gets to Palm Beach, he had developed a few hotels, but when he stepped foot on this island and this property, the story says, he looked out, surveyed things and said, this is the location where I'm going to build one of the finest resorts in the world to compete with, at the time, the French and Italian Riviera were considered the most luxurious places you could vacation if you were in that set. And so that was Flagler's vision, and he was a visionary. He was right. Palm Beach, as today, is still known as one of the most affluent resort destinations in the world. Yeah. And the Breakers enjoyed a lot of prosperity because of that. But I think any organization, and I think it applies to people too, it's been around a long time. You're going to go through some ups and downs.
Right.
And so his vision was right, but it was challenged many times.
That makes sense. And I think that's a good point, because you think about any sort of business that's been around for 15, 20, 30 years, there's a way of doing things. And if you're not careful, if you're not looking at how the environment's changing, how the market's changing, how even competition is rising slowly, you can lose your footing in that competitive advantage. So fast forward to today, what does that look like? I mean, you've been in leadership here now for the last
24 years as president,
okay.
And I've been with the company for 33 years.
Okay, so you've seen transformation and improvements all along the way, which today the Breakers of Palm Beach has the reputation of being the standard. It's world-class service. All of your staff are very caring, very intentional. They love working here.
Yeah.
How did you create an environment like that?
Yeah, it is a great situation today. We're really proud of what's happened here and what's happening here. And I think as painful as some of the sort of blows we took in the 80s and early 90s were, and again, I always like to sort of take this from the company to the individual. Sometimes that's what you need. Ideally, you don't have to sort of learn that way. But, we were in a very difficult position because on really every front. I mentioned the competitive situation with Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, but our own situation, even without that competition, resting sort of on our laurels, maybe thinking we were better than we actually were, becoming complacent. And the business sort of climate's changing, whereas historically, I would say the hotel industry, and maybe a lot of others, but certainly this industry was more sort of regimented. The culture was more sort of top down, my way or the highway.
Yeah.
Speak when you're spoke, subservient, sort of, very kind of rigid. Thanks to our, the next generation of this great family ownership, we're really proud. The Breakers today is the only large historic luxury resort in the world still in the hands of its original owners. Henry Flagler's descendants through marriage still own this property. And there was a generational change happening at the time as well. So we not only had these business dynamics, competition, generational change. And the younger generation at that time, they were in their 40s, I think, they sort of realized we were up against a challenge, took a step back, were really open to the constructive sort of look at the business.
Yeah.
And in fact, our chairman of the board, Jim Keenan, said to me the day I became president, he promoted me to president of the company in 1994. And he said to me, never talked about finances really. Is interesting. We're going to come back to the business side, but to your point about culture, he said, we are really not happy. We're not proud of what's happening here. The product we're delivering to our guests, the way our staff is, the staff satisfaction, condition of the property, we have to make some serious changes. What are we going to do? And that's where the idea of really focusing in on culture more than we doubled down, and even more than that, frankly. We had to fix everything, don't get me wrong, but there was nothing more important to us than creating a culture where our team would come to work every day, looking forward to coming to work, and bring their best energy, carry it through the day, and at the end of the day, feel gratified, which sounds like, of course, right? Sounds
great.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, not that easy to do in the real world, with all of the pressures, financial pressures, and different personalities and management styles. But we really, we focused on three things: hiring the right people to begin with, matching, creating alignment. In doing that, people that shared our values, shared our energy, shared our passion. Again, all things that make sense. Really hard to do, right? I mean, how do you figure that out in the hiring process? How do you, when you're under pressure, and you need a pair of hands right now. Do you stick to that, or do you have to sort of yield? And so hiring the right people, creating a culture, as I described to you, a culture that was focused, I think, to an extreme on employee fulfillment, employee engagement, and using that to drive everything else we were trying to accomplish in the organization. And within that culture, maybe, doubling down again on the idea of teamwork.
Yeah.
Very simple, powerful concept. We cannot do this. This is impossible at the level we want to do it and continue without teamwork, everyone pulling at the same end of the rope. Recognizing, again, we have 50 different cultures here, probably, age groups, personalities. So long way, I think, of saying, as I wrap that together, I remember this. Boy, it's fun to really think back, because now we see the fruits of this effort. We turn this into a human resources organization. So I often said back then, I still say it today, we're a human resources enterprise that happens to be in the hotel business.
That's brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is all about the people, and we're not going to get anywhere if we don't get those things right. And then we deploy those people we hire, those people that we hopefully motivate and into our other businesses. The hotel business is the main business,
right? But
we have other businesses, and it's the same mentality. The human resources function, we like to say, got the corner office.
I like that.
The HR VP wasn't the president of the company, but everyone knew that is where we were putting all of our eggs.
Right.
And we made that the central theme. So today, in a sort of a nutshell, Mike, and this will marry a few of these things together, we talk about this model, and I think it's pretty unique, of family care. And within that is all of this cultural stuff. That's real. This isn't a game. It's not a technique. It's not a training program or a gimmick. It is genuine. And that's where the real power comes from. And family care coupled with Fortune 500 discipline, that you got to find the balance. And it's interesting, as you asked me, to sort of start by telling you, where my journey came from, mom and pop, high finance. It kind of matched up naturally that, this is a people business. We love our people. We genuinely care for them, but we're not going to be able to care for them if we're not running a successful business.
Exactly.
And so it's a beautiful marriage of those two things in really, good balance. And so our results are 92% of the people who work here say this is a great place to work, and they're proud to work here.
Wow. Yeah, that's unheard of.
It's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
We measure that with the help of a national consultant in this field, and it is absolutely best in class, with the top companies that achieve ratings at that level. And we've proven to ourselves that our results are far better because of the, on this end of the spectrum, the family care driving employee engagement and employee productivity. And we certainly had financial goals. Absolutely did. But our focus on culture is probably more important, and it drove our results far beyond our financial goals. We've done way better than we thought. So we've doing these things because we think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And getting the far greater benefit than we ever anticipated.
That is spectacular. And when you think about the current generation, the younger generation, if you will, that are always looking for a deeper meaning behind what they do, the fact that you have an emphasis on the culture, on the people of the organization, and then the people you serve, it creates this fulfillment, as the original vision was, to have with anyone who works in the organization. we talked about how HR in theory has a corner office, right? And the culture that has been established here at the Breakers is very healthy. The turnover rate is very low. When you think about the legacy of the Breakers and now going forward into the future, many organizations have an open door policy. Does the Breakers have something like that? And if so, what does that look like in relation to kind of planning for the future and getting feedback from the team?
We talk about hiring, culture, teamwork. Well, that on the other side, as I referenced a couple times already, discipline, Fortune 500 discipline, the business side. One of the earliest strategies that we put in place was a total quality management strategy, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but generally. Especially in the 90s, the idea was to create processes that worked and had, if not zero defects, the fewest possible. And there's so many moving parts in our business. And we had to pretty much fix everything, as I said. So here's what we did. And it was really effective to the question about open door policy. Number one, on the pure business side, we studied some of the classic models out there. And TQM at the time was a really powerful buzzword. Today it's called a lot of other things, but it's essentially the same concept, doing things right the first time.
Right.
And zero defects. And so we studied a number of models, but then we modified and created one of our own, our internal homegrown total quality management. That's the discipline side. The way we merged that with our culture was to involve everyone in the organization in this movement. And what does that mean? I think in a lot of organizations, particularly in situations like we were in, where we had to turn this thing around fast because the threats were significant. A lot of organizations, I think that effort would be vested in a few senior people and maybe outside management consultants.
Right.
We engaged every single person we could in this company in the process, from dishwashers to gardeners to middle managers and everyone in between. And we launched this total quality management program, which essentially said at its core, the people in the field doing the job have the answers.
That's
but
good.
You have to open the door and you have to get them in. You have to give them a voice. Then you have to have a process. It can't be a free-for-all, a town hall where everyone's like a family dinner, everyone's yelling and screaming. And get them involved because they have the answers. They're in many cases, they're not being asked. You're not tapping that energy. And if you connect that back to this idea that we only hire talented people at every level of this organization, good people, team-oriented, positive energy, why aren't we asking them to help? And so instead of vesting this in a few people, we put an army on the job. And we've carried that through the last 25 years, and I'm going to project it into the future in a moment. But what we found was it was absolutely true. The power of the people, sort of thing, and the process, because it had to be organized. And we now say, let's say in the area of security, just to use an example.
Yeah.
We have 35 people on our security force, but we feel like we have 2,000 employees, eyes and ears, everyone involved, everyone having a stake in it. And so we go from 35 to 2,000. I mean,
wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's leverage in that.
Yeah.
And so when you use the word open door policy, I think typically that is sort of in a context of employee sort of complaints maybe, and how do they file a grievance, and that certainly is a part with an organization like ours, 2,200 people. There's you need that system and structure, but we sort of went out and around that. and expanded it to more of a not just an open door policy with respect to grievances, but that engaging everyone in our workforce particularly to solve problems. And certainly to do other things, reinforce things that were going well and how to build on those.
Yeah.
I'm often asked, how did you turn this thing around? How did you guys do it? And I think a lot of times people are thinking there's some magic answer, some magic wand, like we waved a wand over this place. And I like to say to this topic, when I look back, it was, we did a lot of big things. There's no disputing that. But the real essence of this was thousands of people getting involved in little improvements every single day over a long period of time, sort of like compound interest.
That's good.
It starts building and building and it's looking good. And then the compounding starts. It doesn't just go in a linear way. You had these points where you just move the whole foundation up. As I think about that and we build on that for the future, we've taken that to an even greater extreme with things like an all-employee confidential opinion survey every 2 or so years, done by the Great Place to Work organization, one of the greatest organizations in that field of consulting. And all employees get to bring it. We ask 58 questions that we need to sort of get a report card on sort of the key drivers of our business and our culture. But then there is an open sort of section. And you can say anything you want. Right. And that's the open door about anything, anybody. And I like to believe, that we don't wait for a survey every 2 years to get that feedback. Right. Ideally, with the total quality management and family culture, that's happening every day. But at a minimum, there's this overlay every 2 years. That's very intense. And out of it came, as I referenced earlier, the composite rating of 92% of the people say this is a great place to work and I'm proud to work here. And I'll get up in front of our team. I've done this many times, said I'm so proud of that. I'm so excited about that. But I'm equally, if not more, excited about the 200 pages of constructive criticism you gave us. Yeah. Because without your feedback, if we don't know, we don't have any chance of probably solving some of these things.
And I think that's a big opportunity that many organizations sometimes overlook, right? They look at maybe just the grievances or just the challenges they face, but they don't necessarily look at it as an opportunity to grow. It's more so a position of defense, right? It's like, you're wrong, and they're trying to prove it. But I like how you guys have been very intentional about creating a culture where a conversation can happen. And the other thing you said about engaging in all 2,000 team members to really participate in almost every role within the organization, that allows you to exponentially improve in those areas.
Another way we expanded upon that was by creating cross-functional, we called it work groups, so that not only was everybody involved in this I call it a movement, really. It was. Today it's more of it's our culture now. It's sort of, we moved it. Yeah. It's moving. Back then we had to get it moving. But when we added the cross-functional piece, say we were working on a problem in the reservations area. Mm-hmm. Clearly, you'd need some, subject experts from the reservations team, and at all levels. Again, especially and probably especially at the lower levels in the battlefield, right? Where we said that's where the real meat is. But then we'd bring in some other people from other parts of the company that had completely, either no viewpoint or other viewpoints, and that not only helped us get to better solutions to the problem, but it reinforced the idea of teamwork and of constructive criticism, how you can grow from that. Constructive criticism isn't mean-spirited, throwing grenades at people. It's constructive, and it also helped us develop people because they were brought into these challenges and would learn from either about the subject itself or just how to tackle a problem. Yeah. How do you fix something when it's going wrong, right? I mean, which is so fundamental to business and even life. But yeah, it has been exponential.
I'm very just thankful that we had a chance to have this conversation. What you've built in your team at the Breakers Palm Beach has been what I believe a template for other organizations to model in terms of how you take care of your people, your team, the culture that you guys have created, and how well you care for your guests. I think to the industry that we're in, we design apps and software, and our customer is the individual, right? And thinking about running a design company very similar to a hospitality company, we're having to do the same thing. We have to be very proactive, understanding what the needs of our customers are, how is our team doing, having that open feedback loop where we can identify those needs and those challenges and then improve the software or technology people are touching. Sure. So there's a lot of, I think, overlap and parallel that anyone listening to this show today, if you deal with a customer, an actual individual, or you have people on your team and you're looking to scale and grow, there's a lot of insight that you shared today that I think will be very, very helpful for organizations to build strong cultures that are very focused on the HR side of the business, because when you take care of your people, you take care of your customers. So when you think about the entrepreneur who's starting their business, maybe they're starting a boutique bed and breakfast or a car wash, just a service-oriented company, and they look at an organization like the Breakers of the Palm Beaches, and they say, well, we're not a multi-million-dollar organization. There's no way we could maybe pay the way you pay or take care of our employees the way you take care of your employees. What advice would you share with someone who might feel a little overwhelmed with the responsibility of taking care of their people?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is, it's easy to have ideals and dreams and goals, and then you got to pay the bills at the end of every day. And I've been there in my life and in my early career in small family businesses where we were really stressed at times. And I sort of think of those as moments of truth where, can you tough it out and stay with the plan? Mm-hmm. Well, when you're young in particular, as a person or business or both, and you don't have the resources, you have the dreams and the right values and the right ideas. It's tough. I think one of my answers to that would be, or ideas would be that it's probably even more critical in those cases that you get the hiring and the culture right. Mm-hmm. It's actually, as I hadn't thought about it, because you have more pressure, it's a tougher challenge. So you only have so many people. You better get it right. I mean, with 2,200 employees, I suppose you could say we can make a few mistakes. We hate to. Sure. We don't like anyone sneaking in here that, doesn't belong here. But we can get by. If you have a team of 10 or 20 and you've got 2 or 3 people that aren't a good fit. Mm-hmm. I talk a lot about alignment when we talk about culture. And it doesn't mean, this is everybody's exactly the same. That's not what it means. The thing we have in common is this bond of, similar values. I can be creative, you can be technical, but we can have similar, and we need both in our organization. I can be from New York and you can be from Florida, and from this, and I can be young and you can be old, but we share values and we're team players. Mm-hmm. One of my greatest mentors, I'm so blessed. I have so many great mentors in my life. And one of them, is just trying to save the world in every way he can. And a big part of that is in the realm of sustainability. And sustainability is a big word. It covers a lot of things, not just energy or food, or it's really a broader spectrum. And Garett Kirk says the key to success with regard to sustainability is having teamwork, a long-term perspective, and return on investment. And so I can apply that back to even this little entrepreneurial example that I don't know anyone, I shouldn't say anyone, very few people make it on their own. If you don't have a team, you certainly need clients.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And usually you do have a team. Even if it's 5 people, I could argue that's more important than 2,000, that you have that team working together. Teamwork, long-term perspective is, and I think this helps in this question too, is if you're not an overnight success financially, as long as you can get by and you're building value doesn't mean your balance sheet maybe necessarily reflects it yet, but you have something there. It's
right.
a product. And if you can just stay with it, stay afloat, be patient, not go for the short-term gain, right?
Mm-hmm.
It will pay off. Now, that's easier said than done when you're sweating, paying the electric bill.
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you that's the benefit of having hindsight with experience with people like me who are older and, more further along in our careers. Hang in there, recognize the difference between expenses and investments. You're building. You may not be making a lot of income, but you are building value.
Right.
And those two tie together to the return on investment. At some point, you got to hit the numbers, and you need to understand. I think everyone is sort of in business, mm-hmm. but not everyone understands business. Not everyone needs to be a CPA or an accountant. But you better have a baseline knowledge. That, I think, is another thing I would say to young, to entrepreneurs and startups. And maybe lastly is, so you can't afford, a board of directors, of high-powered people.
Right.
Well, you can look for great role models. Mm-hmm. Form your own board, your imaginary board in your mind, and observe people. And maybe you're fortunate like me and you can have some mentors that aren't looking to get, economic benefits. It's psychic. It feels good. You're helping. It's part of your mission. And get some help like that as well. Mike, if there's a final thought today, I don't know how much more time we have, but based on my experience with this model, which has been so effective, is for companies, big and small, to invest more in your people and your culture. I think this is what we've talked about, for this segment, is invest more in your people and your culture. A, because first of all, it's the right thing to do. And B, it is good business done properly. And so we intentionally want to, even though this is a business, we put it's the right thing to do first. And we mean that. And we're, again, far from perfect, but what we've experienced is it really is good business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Paul, for taking the time out of your busy day to sit down and have this very valuable conversation. A lot of wisdom was shared in this conversation. And again, I appreciate you for everything you've done and what you represent, not only for just the role you've played in my life as a mentor, if you will, and an encourager, but also just for what you do for the team here at the Breakers of the Palm Beach. So thank you again for joining me on Founders Craft.
It's been my pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.